I'm Nick. Here's your global intelligence briefing. Today, the Middle East may have crossed a line that could reshape the global economy. The Houthis have announced a naval blockade of Saudi Arabia, while Iran continues to keep the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed. If both choke points remain blocked, one of the world's largest oil exporters could lose nearly every major route to international markets. That means millions of barrels of oil may no longer reach consumers. Oil prices are already climbing, fuel prices are rising, and if this crisis continues, the consequences could spread far beyond the Gulf, affecting economies across the globe. But that's only the beginning. I'll also break down what's really happening in the Russia-Ukraine war, examine the latest claims from both sides, and explain why the political consequences may become even more significant than the military ones. Today, the Houthis announced a naval blockade of Saudi Arabia. In my view, this is the single most important geopolitical development of the day, because it means the Middle East's largest oil producer has effectively lost its remaining export routes. Iran continues to block the Strait of Hormuz. Now the Houthis are threatening traffic through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait as well. Together, those two choke points control the main pathways Saudi Arabia has used to deliver oil from the Persian Gulf to global markets. Under normal conditions, nobody would transport crude across the entire Arabian Peninsula if tankers could simply load directly at Gulf terminals. Loading costs are minimal, Saudi crude is highly profitable, and the logistics are straightforward. But the war between Iran and the United States has changed that equation completely. According to Iran, ships ignoring its restrictions continue to come under attack. Shipping data also indicates that oil transit through the Strait of Hormuz has effectively stopped, regardless of political statements. The reality on the water appears very different. At this point, Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, leaving Gulf oil exporters with only a handful of alternatives. The world was once receiving roughly 20 million barrels of oil and petroleum products every day from the Persian Gulf. Now that flow has been severely disrupted. Ironically, the United States has contributed to the situation as well. Iran remains under heavy sanctions, preventing it from freely exporting its own oil. Without those restrictions, Iran alone could have supplied roughly 2 million barrels per day to international markets. Instead, those barrels are also missing. The result is a massive reduction in global supply. Fuel prices in the United States have already begun climbing, reaching around $4 per gallon in some areas. Earlier in the conflict, oil prices remained relatively stable because the world's largest economies released hundreds of millions of barrels from their strategic petroleum reserves. More than 400 million barrels eventually entered the market, softening the immediate shock. But those emergency reserves have now been largely exhausted. There is no comparable buffer left to stabilize prices. At this point, China holds one of the few remaining major strategic stockpiles. Yet Beijing is focused on different priorities. Instead of supplying global markets, China has been increasing fuel exports to Russia, where domestic fuel shortages have become a growing problem. Belarus has dramatically expanded gasoline deliveries into Russia. Kazakhstan has also begun supplying fuel. China is exporting gasoline as well, although on a more limited scale because fuel prices inside Russia remain lower than in China, making the trade less profitable without special arrangements. The key point is that the global energy market now recognizes the seriousness of the situation. Brent crude moving above $90 per barrel is more than just another price milestone. It signals that investors increasingly believe this supply disruption may not be temporary. If nothing changes, oil could climb beyond $100 per barrel. Some analysts even argue that, under a prolonged disruption, a market equilibrium between $150 and $200 per barrel is possible. Personally, I doubt governments will allow prices to reach those extremes without taking additional action. For now, however, the market still believes this war will remain relatively short. The moment investors conclude that the conflict is becoming long-term, oil prices could accelerate dramatically. Public opinion may become just as important as events on the battlefield. Current polling suggests that nearly 60% of Americans support reaching a peace agreement with Iran. By contrast, Only about 24% support continuing Trump's war policy. If those numbers hold, the political consequences could become severe. The next elections are already approaching. With only a few months remaining, time is rapidly running out. Political science consistently shows that. Major economic crises influence voters most when they occur shortly before an election. If rising fuel prices and the Gulf conflict continue into the fall, they could become a major liability for the current administration. That is why I believe this war has a limited political window. Either the conflict begins winding down within the next month, or Washington itself may face growing internal political turmoil. Speculation about President Trump has also intensified. Rumors regarding his mental and physical condition continue circulating in political circles. Whether those claims are true or false is impossible to determine from speculation alone. However, politically they could become highly significant. One possible scenario being discussed is that Republicans could attempt to replace Trump before the election, allowing Vice President J.D. Vance to assume the presidency and lead the party into the campaign. I'm not saying this will happen. I'm saying these discussions are becoming part of the broader political conversation. If the Gulf War ends quickly, those questions may disappear. If it drags on while gasoline prices continue rising, the political pressure inside the United States could increase dramatically. Now let's turn to the war itself. One of Ukraine's most well-known military commentators, who also serves in a senior role overseeing drone forces, recently claimed that 183 vessels had been struck in the Sea of Azov within just 15 days. Technically, the wording used was hit, not sunk, but the map accompanying the announcement displayed symbols traditionally used to represent ships that have gone to the bottom. That creates a very different impression. As far as confirmed information goes, no ships have actually been sunk. In my opinion, those claims need to be treated far more carefully. The real impact is serious enough without exaggeration. These attacks are carried out by long-range drones launched from Ukrainian-controlled territory west of the Dnipro River to reach the Sea of Azov. Those drones must fly hundreds of kilometers before reaching their targets. The longer the flight, the less explosive payload the drone can carry. Every additional kilometer means more fuel and less room for explosives. By the time these drones reach ships operating near the Kerch Strait or farther into the Sea of Azov, they are carrying only a relatively small warhead. That makes a major difference. These are not large naval drones. They are not Shahid-type systems carrying massive explosive loads. Even if a drone carries 20 or 50 kilograms of explosives, it is still facing an enormous steel tanker. Under those conditions, its destructive potential becomes much more limited.